Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Kenilworth Road. Merry Christmas. Unfortunately, Norwich City proved to be more cold turkey than most of us would have been hoping for tonight, as everyone sought a response after what was a very difficult weekend last week, particularly for Dean Smith. A 2-0 home defeat to Blackburn. We saw a change of shape. We saw a change of personnel. But sadly, we've seen the same result. And I would imagine a lot of the discourse, a lot of the discussion will once again be reflected on Norwich City's boss, his future, as obviously we build up to a double header of games at Kenilworth Road. And we'll reflect on that. Let's start with the game though. So Norwich City changed their shape. They went to a 3-4-1-2. Gabriel Sara behind the front two of Sargent and Pukki. They played Aarons and Yanulis as wing backs. Liam Gibbs came in after what was a very promising cameo towards the end of the game last weekend. And we expected to see a response, a bit more vigour, a bit more energy about Norwich City. I have to be honest, I looked at the starting lineup. I felt there was balance in there. If they pushed the fullbacks on, you could see where the creativity was coming. There was a lot of logic behind it. They've had 9 days, 8 days, whatever you want to add to work on this shape, and have been working on this shape for 8 days. And what we saw in the first half really was a team that has played that shape for 8 days against a team that's played that shape for a few years. And Norwich were really turgid in the first half, really struggled. I think they had 2 touches in the opposition penalty area, 0.05 XG, really lacked attacking intent. There was one team with energy, with gusto, with vigour, and sadly that wasn't Norwich City. Luton dominated the second ball. They were probing, they were playing with purpose, they had attacking combinations, they were feeding Morris and Adebayo really well. They were linking off them. There was a really, really, really good structure and setup to how they played. And this is Rob Edwards' first home game at Kenilworth Road tonight. He got a wonderful reaction as he came out onto the pitch. Luton have only won 2 games here this season as well prior to this one. So all of that adds up, and what the first half was felt to me a bit more like containment. Norwich City under the cosh, getting dominated, losing the physical contest, and then they had to almost suppress and be able to take those punches. And they did that pretty unsuccessfully, and it came at the extent of their attacking play getting completely thwarted and becoming almost completely non-existent. It was a really tough watch, to be honest, a really difficult watch. There was one team, as I said, playing with an identity, with a game plan, with purpose, and the other was Norwich City, and that was Luton Town. They didn't really construct any what you'd describe as maybe clear chances. There was a free kick from James Bree, which Angus Gunn clawed out of the top corner superbly, but actually probably more impressive was the follow-up to deny Carlton Morris from close range and to beat the ball away from a corner. The closest Norwich City came in the first half, to be honest, was a Gabriel Sara shot from about 30 yards that didn't really test Ethan Horvath in the Luton goal. But it was a low-quality affair, I would say. But Luton, certainly in terms of general play, in terms of territory, and in terms of possession, absolutely dominated it. And Norwich City did need to respond at half-time. And in fairness, they did. They pushed their full-backs higher. They threw Adam Eder on. They dropped Josh Sargent back into more of a number 10 position. I'm not quite sure what Kieran Dow would have been thinking when that decision was made. And they did. They did have a bit more purpose about their play. There was a better attacking thrust about them. There was a bit more energy about their play. I think I would say part of that was largely down to Luton's energy levels decreasing, I felt, in periods. And actually, you look at the 2 goals that they've conceded tonight, and they've been the victims of their own downfall again. It was a cheap concession from Dimi Yanulis. I think there was a massive pole in front of the press box. I missed it slightly. I'm not sure if it was a cheap concession with a pass or there was a turnover. But he was robbed either way. I'm told in retrospect by my colleagues that it was a really poor error. Alan Campbell picks it up, wonderful strike into the bottom corner of the net. And from there, it feels like the kind of narrative is set, the tone is set, and it becomes very difficult. And Norwich City aren't particularly a great team at chasing games. They haven't structurally been a great team at chasing games all season. Their kind of response has been to throw on attacking players. But they were pressing relatively okay, and they did find a breakthrough. And again, it was a risk taken by Ben Gibson to step in, to beat his man with the ball and then slot a lovely pass into Teemu Pukki. And it was a wonderful composed finish for him for his 8th goal of the season. And I mean, as bad as things feel right now, just imagine how bad they would be without Teemu Pukki. I can see a lot of your comments. I'm coming on to them. Just bear with me. I want to run through the game first because there will have been a lot of people who weren't here tonight. So Norwich then equalised, and then obviously they get the bonus, if you want to call it that, of Gabriel also seeing red. He was dismissed for a foul on Teemu Pukki on the 80th minute. But that period, actually, there was a 10-minute spell there where Norwich were the better team and they were forcing the issue and they were huffing and puffing again. There wasn't really what I would describe as the construction of really, really good opportunities and really good key chances. but they were huffing, puffing, they were dominating, they had possession, and they were utilising it relatively okay. I don't want to stress how good a period it was, but certainly in contrast to the first half, it was a big step up. So that needs to be acknowledged. But again, victims of their own downfall. Luton fall to 10 men. And just when you think that there's not a way for Norwich City to lose this football match, Cauley Woodrow spins Grant Hanley. There's a couple of really limp, meek challenges in there from Norwich City's defence, and he smashes it into the top corner of the net. And it's good night Vienna, and possibly good night Dean Smith as well. And, I think that in football, sometimes things can marry up and they can be wedded together, and the logic behind them is sound, and the logic behind them is not bad, and they make sense on paper, and a coach can be good and a club can be not so good, or a club can be in a good place and a coach can maybe not be in a good place, and that can be really successful. And sometimes you have periods where it just doesn't work, and it's the wrong person at the wrong time, it's not clicking, it's not progressing, and it needs to change. And that's where Norwich City are at the moment. This is a really difficult time, and this now for me is a long farewell for Dean Smith. It's now about when, I feel, rather than if his tenure as Norwich City head coach gets cut short. We had more chance for him to be removed from the away support tonight. Chance of it's not our fault as well, after his comments last weekend. I was down pitch side when Radio Northwich Chris Gorham asked him directly whether he would be in charge for Friday's game. He refused to answer that question. He later answered the same question from TalkSport, where he said, unless I'm told otherwise, yes. Finally just concluded by saying, obviously it doesn't help my position. He's very self-aware, and what I would say is the personal abuse of him and his family, or materially impacting his family or of other Norwich City colleagues and people who work at the football club, obviously isn't something that you want to see. But equally, the fans are really frustrated, and they feel at the moment like they're not being listened to, and it feels like this has been the moment. And to be honest, in my view, it shouldn't have got to this point. We shouldn't have been here at Luton today after what Dean Smith endured last weekend. Almost for his sake more than anything else, he shouldn't have been given this game tonight. It should have been. It should have been all over. It isn't. I obviously don't make those decisions, but it feels increasingly like this is not going to change. And I've seen someone make a very good comparison on social media where it feels a lot like Valérien Ismaël at West Brom. I think it was a couple of years ago, where they were sat inside the playoffs, and everyone externally was probably wondering, well, what's the fuss about? But West Brom fans were recognising the style of play wasn't great, that they were losing their grip on the playoffs, that maybe the trends and the directions of travel weren't particularly positive. And in the end, West Brom sacked Ismaël. And that increasingly feels like where Norwich City are heading and where they're at. And look, I'm sure Dean Smith has worked really hard over the last 8 days and over the last 13 months. And I'm sure that Norwich City players and everyone involved with the football club has worked really, really, really hard to turn this around and to try and make this into a really successful season. But ultimately, it hasn't happened. For whatever reason, and for whoever's fault you wish to attribute that to, it has not happened this season. So the big question now is what's going to be done about it, and who's going to grab this football club by the scruff of its neck and make sure that it changes. Because we've got 2 games coming up at Carrow Road now. Norwich City will play Reading and they will play Watford. And if there is no change, if Dean Smith is still in post, that's going to be very ugly. It's going to be very ugly from the start. They've lost back-to-back games. They're 3 points from 16th. This is not a football club that is going to achieve automatic promotion at this moment in time in its current guise unless something radically changes. He's tried a system change. He's tried a personnel change. And it feels, I'm afraid, that all there is really left to change is the head coach. I like Dean Smith. I think he's a really good human being, really kind human being, really nice human being. But, sometimes there's no shame in all parties just holding their hands up and saying, do you know what? This isn't working. It's not working for us and it's not working for you. And I feel that's where the situation is right now. And it's a sorry end, I feel, to what has been 13 months where Norwich City have really struggled to progress and where players collectively and individually have really struggled to progress. And when you get to this stage, there feels an inevitability about it because, okay, Norwich win on Friday. What happens then if they lose against Watford? We're back to square one. It feels now like Dean Smith is going to have to win a lot of games, a lot of games, but also win them in a way that is convincing and do something that actually we have not seen in 13 months of his tenure here. So Norwich are in a sticky spot. Dean Smith is in a sticky spot, and I'm not quite sure, if I'm honest with you, how this can continue. I'm sure people will be speaking, and I'm sure they will be coming to a verdict one way or the other. Stuart Webber was here tonight. Neil Adams was here tonight. Delia Smith and Michael Wynne-Jones were here tonight. They were sat just behind us in the press box. There were some really glum faces at full time. Dean Smith walked with his head looking down, didn't acknowledge the Norwich City fans. A lot of the players did and were clapped off. But this feels like it's heading in one direction, and it feels like it needs to head in that direction, and pretty swiftly, because ultimately, at this moment in time, the longer that he stays in post, I'm afraid the more toxic, the more difficult it becomes for him, for Norwich City, for the football club, for the fans, for the mood around the place. And if a football club isn't together, forget promotion, forget everything else, they don't achieve anything, they don't finish in the playoffs, this season slides and ebbs away. And this is a really golden opportunity for Norwich City. And the indecision at this moment in time, if that is the case, could prove costly, because every game that this prolongs now is another game that whoever comes next, when they come next, will not get to make up the ground. And it's 12 points at the moment to the top two. And obviously there are teams below Norwich who have games in hand that would, I think, knock them out of the top six. Really difficult night. I really, really feel for Dean Smith on a human level, because he's not a bad person. And to be fair, I don't think that the Norwich fans have ever made out that he's a bad human being. This just has not worked. It has not worked. It's been a step in a direction that hasn't proved fruitful for Norwich City. And I'm actually reading a quote in front of me here. It's a Luton banner. Forza 2020 it is, and it says, it's amazing how much more successful a team can be when no individual takes the credit. And that's a really interesting quote, I think, to end on tonight. A really dismal night for Norwich City. It feels like the end of something. Whether it will prove to be or not, only the coming hours and the days will prove that to be the case. Reading come to Carrow Road on Friday. There's a tight turnaround. Norwich then host Watford in Carrow Road in the new year on the 2nd. I think that's Monday, isn't it? It's that time of year where nobody really knows what day of the week it is. And then they've got a break between that Watford game at home to then Preston away. They've got an FA Cup game sandwiched in between that. And that would obviously give everyone a bit of time to breathe if that was the way that it needed to go from here. We will, of course, be across all of our channels should anything happen from here, should any decision get taken, and should, of course, any reports surface. This has been a really difficult night, and I'm sure a lot of the focus will be on Dean Smith and what comes next. But for the here and now, Norwich City have lost 2-1 at Luton Town this evening. A dismal night, a successive victory. Where next? Enjoy what's rest of your Christmas. Very, very happy New Year. I know I'm going to see you before New Year, aren't I? So I've gone prematurely with that. I'm trying to end on some positivity. But thank you very much for watching. This is the final away game, isn't it, of 2022. Not been great. Thank you very much for watching. Safe trip home to all of those 1,000 plus Norwich City fans that came tonight. I thought they were terrific. And yeah, we will see you again very, very soon. Thanks for watching.